Hey everybody, hope you all are doing okay. I've been taking a break from actually speaking and instead have been doing some research, doing some heavy research, and I've actually learned a lot, especially about symbolism across culture, including places like China, places like India, these other places that I hadn't looked at before. Also the Vedas as well. So the common theme among all these places, and even what we see in Christian art, but it's been hidden, and I'm going to show you a little bit about it. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but the thing that I want to show you today is that the missing capstone of the Great Pyramid has been solved as far as what it represents and why it's actually missing. As far as the details of why it's actually missing, I'll touch on it for just a second, but it's better that I go into detail on that in another video, but you at least get the idea of what I'm talking about. So when I go through all of this old art, and if you know my channel, you know I've been posting a lot of images lately. This helps me actually learn at the same time while I'm doing all this sacred geometry. So one of the things that I noticed by Leonardo da Vinci is in his Vitruvian Man. And I noticed that the way he had his arms, and people think he's squaring the circle, but I was like, no, that doesn't make sense, because his arms are in the same position that you always see Jesus in when Jesus is on the cross. Okay. Well, the Jesus on the cross symbolism dates back, it goes up back forever. But what it's actually showing is the tree of life. Because if we take images like this, we can see that the tree of life and Jesus on the cross, his arms are in the same angle as we see on the tree of life. Now, why is this significant? Because when you read all the text, when you find out why Jesus' head is where it's located, between the top two bars, you'll find out that there's symbolism regarding what's called dat or dath in Kabbalism, which means the uniting of the heart and the mind, or understanding and wisdom. Okay. So with those two together, what we can find is in all of this ancient symbolism, and all of this symbolism, for example, Manly Hall goes into this, and this is actually a copy of his symbol in his Secret Teaching of All Ages. But you can see that this spirit symbol, the top three here, the Shen that you see right here, these top three flames represent the Trinity, and that's the exact same angle that we see the Trinity in the Kabbalah. And of course, when you place a tree of life on there, it all fits in there and everything. The triangle has a very sacred meaning to it. It doesn't have anything to do with the fake Illuminati. What it has to do with is the makeup of reality or the universe, from the very Trinity at the very, very top to the very smallest that you can think of in our physical world. At the very smallest level, you have a shape before you have a line, and that shape, the very most simplest shape you can have, is a triangle. When you put the triangles together, they create all the other shapes. Okay, so from the very microscopic to the very, very large, that's why this triangle is a very sacred thing. So here's another of the same image, and this is a quote from Manly P. Hall. The Kabbalists use the letter Shen to signify the trinity of the first three Sephiroth. The central circle slightly above the other two is the first Sephiroth, Kether, the white head, the crown. The other two circles represent Chokmah, which is wisdom, the father, and Bina, which means understanding, and that's the mother. It's the masculine feminine principle. From the union of the Divine Father and the Divine Mother are produced the worlds of generations. A lot of people don't understand this heart-mind thing. In Kabbalah, Tibereth is equal to the heart, but so is Bina, which is up here on this left side. Okay, and that makes a difference when you take a look at the Tetragrammaton that's stacked like a tetractys, because when you get up to the last two become heart and mind, and when they unite, that's when you get dath, or knowledge. So I started looking at all these older cathedrals. You remember St. Joseph Cathedral and what we see right here. And if you can see, the Queen's Chamber is located where his groin is. This is where the heart is. And then you have God the Father way up here. The reason I'm showing the tetractys is because the tetractys is another version of the tree of life. It's kind of compressed together. And this is the tetragrammaton showing the same kind of thing as a tetractys. What you'll notice is inside this tetractys, you see this guy in meditation. And what you see right here in this old art that you see in cathedrals is a very common theme. You see Jesus right here inside the hexagram because it represents the tree of life in a different form. And if you notice, his halo, the middle of his head is right in that top bar. This is where it becomes heart and mind right here between these top two before it reaches the singularity. Okay? I know this is a lot to take in, but I'm just trying to show you where all this came from. This came from a Freemason site right here. Now, you've already seen this before, but I borrowed his stack right here inside this website, and I borrowed his little symbol right here. And if you can see the way the tetragrammaton works as you move up the tree of life, it's the same symbolism. Right here you have heart, but here you have heart and mind moved together. So heart is on the left side, which is Bina. And when they combine, which is what Jesus is always showing on the cross, because that's where his head is located right in between these two. Okay? And I just plugged his symbolism in. All this is sacred geometry, and the beauty about sacred geometry is when you use it, it's so exact that when you plug it in, you learn all kinds of hidden things that you wouldn't have even known existed. This is what's been going on for a long time. I have countless images. Same thing that we see right here with the Assyrian tree of life. And here's an image of Christ. Let's not confuse Jesus with Christ. Christ is a title. That was not Jesus' last name. It is a level of consciousness that can be achieved. I just want to make sure that everybody understands that. So when you see Jesus on the cross, it's actually a representation of you or any man rising himself up the tree. And what it says is in the Zohar, heart and mind, okay, it says, and he explains his words that the smoke arises from Bina, which is in the heart. So this is Bina right here. So it's the heart. Okay. Notice the symbolism is the same right here. Okay. But we're moved up to 2 when we're in the Trinity area. Considered to be an understanding heart, it rises to Chokmah, which is the brain. So we have the left brain, heart, right brain, brain. Okay. And the central column, Zer Anpin, that rises up the tree of life and unites Chokmah and Bina, these two, together. And that is why you always see it glowing right here. This is the uniting of wisdom and understanding, which is the secret of a heart that understands knowledge. So a lot of people have thought that the heart is tied to this loving kindness thing. There's actually another Sephiroth on the tree of life that's associated to that. But what it's actually associated to on the tree of life is devotion to the great work. It means trying to understand. And when you look in Kabbalah and it says these kind of things and you read the Zohar, all you have to do is go out in the Bible and search for wisdom and understanding, and you'll see that this is exactly the case. All the verses that talk about wisdom and understanding, they talk about those two being more important than anything. And that if somebody has understanding of wisdom, that's where the good stuff happens. A lot of people have been dumbed down because they think it's all about being loving and all this kind of stuff, but no, it's actually not. It's not tied to that. It's tied to understanding. And the only way you can understand is to get out there and try to figure stuff out. But do it with sincerity because you enjoy it. Now here we have some more symbolism. We're going to show you the Buddhas. Now the Buddhas are very similar to Jesus. There's some things about them. This geometry that you see here is the flower of life, but on top of that, what you have is what's called Metatron's cube. Now the beauty of Metatron's cube, Da Vinci explored with this. I'll show you here in just a bit. With it, when you connect all the points to all the other circles, it can create any of the basic Platonic solids, from a tetrahedron to a cube, all these things. So you can find all of those images inside this once those are connected. But what it also helps you do is decode paintings. If you see these circles around this thing right here, when you see their halos on their head, those halos go in the circles. And if you notice, his forehead's always across this line. This is the same line that would be considered the area of the cross. Okay, this is where Jesus' head ends up. Now, if you look at the angles of his arms, that are slightly at an angle. It makes a steep pyramid. Okay, you'll notice that the same thing is happening right here. Okay, And so when you note how to place all this stuff, and if you notice right where that is, right in between his two eyes, right on his forehead. And you can see that thing fits right in that circle. And when you do these kinds of things, all the other stuff lines up. And what you'll find is that all across culture, we're seeing the same symbolism. So here's another one. Notice the arms. Notice where this hits his head. And notice the buns on the top of their head are actually pointing to what? They're pointing to the very tip, which we'll see here in just a bit when we take a look at the capstone of the Great Pyramid. Now, there's a lot of talk about Saturn and the hexagram. Okay, the hexagram is probably one of the most important symbols that there possibly is. It's not related specifically to Saturn. For example, water crystals are shaped like hexagons, okay, or excuse me, hexagrams. Okay, hexagrams are made up of triangles, which are smaller pieces, like you see right here. Okay, and you're going to see why this is really important later. But also, when we want to represent the cross or the tree of life in the other form, which is the tetractys, then this middle area right here turns into a hexagram or a cube. Okay. Now this cube, if you take a look, if you unfold a cube, it's actually a cross. And right here we have Jesus in a hexagram, and we have him on a cross, and we can see that it is the same symbolism. Okay, but people are being dumbed down. They're being fed disinfo, so they won't understand this kind of stuff. Here's one with Jesus' head and a halo. Same thing. Notice how the cross is right on the heart, right between his eyes, and you notice that fits right in the circle, so all of the geometry lines up. Also notice that his arms are in the same angle as the Buddha that we saw. Okay? These common things that you see have been hidden from people for a long time. Here's another one of Jesus. Look at his arms. See the angle that they're at, forming that steep pyramid? You'll notice that it's right here in this drawing as well. That fits right in the big circle. This is right between his eyes. All the same stuff. Here's another Buddha. So I think you get the point, okay? Now this is where I noticed that I had a pretty good idea about what was going on. Because when I saw this particular four-faced Buddha, I thought, well, there's four sides to the pyramid. The guy was sitting in a tetractys, meditating. Manly Hall said that the pyramid is a great meditation symbol, and that it is a symbol of universal mind. And so when I saw this guy's four faces right here, I was like, well, this guy must be a representation of that. I said, in fact, on top of his head, it looks like there's a tetractys. And sure enough, when we put him in there, there is. But here's the key to this. The other point that I noticed about it was his leg. And if you look at his leg down there, that's standing on the ground, he's doing that for a particular reason. He's actually showing part of an important shape that we'll use in order to crack the pyramid here in just a bit. And the reason that you see the yod, or the white capstone area on the top of the pyramid, is because in most all of ancient cultures, and I'm not going to go into this one very deep right now, what you find is that from the beginning of creation, it wasn't, at the very start of stuff, it wasn't the creation of the physical world. We had this movement and descending down from what we cannot describe to what we call mind. And then from mind, we had all the archetypal forms, all these type of things that Plato told us about. He received the mysteries from Egypt. And then eventually, continuing to move down, then finally, almost like a tree, almost like a pyramid, right? It broke into physical reality, all right, using these same archetypes that it used to fashion the physical world. This is pretty much a common understanding across culture. Now, the reason for the symbol of the yod at the very top and why it's missing is because the ultimate supreme God in all of these cultures was always considered unknowable. And if you listen to the initiation of the pyramid, you'll also have hear Manly Hall go into this as well. He talks about the other cultures are also missing the very top of their structures as well. It's not because somebody stole a gold capstone. It's because it represents the unknowable cause, the unknowable first cause that started everything. And so they showed this on the pyramid by leaving the top of it off. Okay, so remember his leg, the way that is. See the way he's placed in here, and you'll notice all of this geometry lines up. I want you to also notice the way his arms follow the same angle as a 30 degrees, 60 degrees. See, anytime you notice that you see geometry where their arms or the angles of their limbs are like 30, 60 degree angles, you have a pretty good idea that they're using some kind of sacred geometry. All right, and there's where Lee, I was trying to get something out of my system because some other channel is calling the minions the Illuminati. I just can't get over all this stuff. Okay, so here's Da Vinci, and another Freemason agreed with me on this. He was actually using the Metatron's cube and the fruit of life, and what we can see here is that his arms, which is what I thought they were doing with the arms of Jesus here, his arms follow those lines and they reach right up into the top two Sephiroth, which is wisdom on the right and understanding on the left. And if you notice where his head is and the halo that would be around his head, that's right in between the two. So when he reaches that point, he connects the two together. If you also notice that middle part is right where his heart is. So the geometry on all this, and so the Freemason, he agreed with me. And what you notice about his arms being straight out is if you move him up this tree of life like I showed you in that kind of a sequence thing, you'll notice that his arms are straight at one point and they'll be under it. And then when he passes a certain point, his arms will be resting on top of it and his head will be in the next circle. It's kind of interesting. These are the kind of things that give you clues. Here's another one of Jesus. And another one of Jesus. We can see that they're doing the same thing. See the arms? Notice where the heart is. Notice where all of the symbolism lines right up. He's right in the middle right there. All this stuff has been hidden from people for a long time. They had to hide it, otherwise it would have gotten destroyed or they would have been killed. Here's another one, a real old image of Jesus right here, or Christ. And we can see the halo, fits right inside here, his heart. You can see the various points on this object. They point to certain things specifically. That's the neat thing about geometry. You can really see this kind of stuff. All right, so now I'm going to show you the Great Pyramid and show you what I discovered. Okay, so the secret to knowing about this thing is you had to know about the Star of David. The Star of David, when you put it together, it actually consists of many little triangles. Okay, and this is an important. We see this in nature as well. Like if you take a look at the sun, for example, and notice that the sunspots always follow the lines on these two areas right here, and it's also the middle of all of the geometry that we've been looking at. Okay, so if you also notice the heart chakra, it's also shaped the same way. All of these keys that we see. So the key to figuring this thing out was to realize, when we take a look, for example, at this Buddha, I want you to look at his leg here, and you'll notice that his leg follows the bottom point of the Star of David, and his head comes up into a point following the Tetractys. So when we place him on in the Star of David, like we're doing right here, and down below, this is the geometry for how the pyramid is shaped. It's inside of Vesica Pisces, and what do you always see inside of Vesica Pisces? You see all pictures of Jesus inside of Vesica Pisces. Okay. So, and what's it pointing to right in the middle? Well, it's showing basically the heart area, but if you notice the corners of the pyramid here, they touch the Vesica Pisces, and the top of it touches where it dips. So let's check our geometry. This outer line right here is what they have for where the casing stones used to be. So if it comes up into a point, we see that point and the tip should basically be right here where the Vesica Pisces dips. Okay. You can see the corners are right on the circles. Okay, and here's the other neat part about it too. His leg, see how it follows this? So somebody knew about this and they incorporated it into later Buddhism symbolism, which is really interesting. And the very bottom part here, which I have zoomed in on, right where his foot is, that's where this is. That's the very bottom part. Okay, so when we put all this together and using the geometry and everything, we see his foot is here. This is where his groin is, like we saw in the other one that was inside that cathedral. Right here would be the solar plexus moving up to the heart, which is right here. His head is in the halo, right here. You see all this geometry matches up, right? And then I noticed that when I placed the pyramid on there, that triangle sits right where the capstone would be. So this is the capstone of the Great Pyramid, hidden in symbolism. And what you find is that when you take a look, and I'll be providing some more videos later on. I didn't want to go into too much detail right now because it's a lot of information, but people have been lied to for a long time. They've been told the wrong things are evil to keep them from looking. This has been a common practice by main Orthodox type churches and stuff like this. The Bible's the Bible's full of truth, right? But it's not necessarily how it's interpreted by the church. The church's interpretation of it is not what the Bible really is. And when you get into stuff like Kabbalah, for example, is all incorporated into the Tetractys. It's just as old as the Tetractys is. Because when you see the Hebrew symbolism, the letters, and all of this, and its association to the Tetragrammaton, which is basically the same as the Tetractys, these types of things, when you see that they're all integrated together, then you'll see that Kabbalah is just as old as the Tetractys. And there are various forms of this type of teaching. Just as you can see right here, this Buddha is very aware of the Tetractys. He's very aware of how it functions. And he's clearly sitting inside a Star of David. The Star of David is found in all these different cultures. So what we see is when we start putting the comparisons together, Kabbalah has a lot of truth. And it's very, 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 very old. And so what it helps people do, and one of the things I'll help you do later on, will be to interpret. And I'll show clear references that make sense. We'll use logic. It shows some of the ways that the Kabbalah can help you decode some of this stuff too. But if you're not familiar with sacred geometry, I highly suggest you get into it. This is Great Pyramid's capstone, and this is what it symbolizes. It symbolizes the very, very top part of creation, and it's missing because it represents the unknowable. So, you guys take care, and I'll talk to you soon.